Barakatuh, and welcome back to Breaking the Habits. So today we're going to talk about intentions, and the again we'll be discussing it from the book of Assistance by Imam Abdullah bin Alwi al-Haddad. And at this point in the journey, why I've chosen to bring intentions in here is we've mentioned it several times, but I haven't really expounded on it in a very detailed way. So the idea here is for us to get into the detail a little bit more, because one of the things that happens if you look at the exercises and things that we've covered thus far, in recovery, the challenge that arises more often than not is the question, why am I even doing this? I mean, there's various resistances that come up in recovery, like around trusting others and around wishing that the journey is pain-free, and feeling like no, we can do it by ourselves and for ourselves, and all of those desires can more often than not hijack our intentions for why we're venturing down this path. When we lose touch with our intentions, then it's really hard for us to stay the course, because what then in fact is helping us determine whether or not we're on course. So Imam Haddad speaks about intentions in his book, and he starts, "You must, O my brother, improve the soundness and sincerity of your intentions. Examine them and reflect well before embarking on your actions. For intentions are the basis of deeds. According to them, your deeds will either be good, ugly, sound, or unsound." The Prophet ﷺ said, and may peace and blessings be upon him, "Deeds are only according to intentions. Each man has that which he intended." So it's a very common hadith that's quoted, "Innamal a'malu binniyah." Right? So here already we're getting an insight into that, and this is like from a coaching perspective. One of the ways in which we identify intention is by reverse engineering it and looking at the action, right? And Imam Haddad is mentioning exactly the same thing here. He's saying that your actions are really the slave of intentions, and so we have to understand what are the intentions that we hold, what are the intentions that drive us, because again, intentions happen on various levels. "You must therefore utter no word, do no action, and decide no matter without the intention of drawing nearer to Allah," right, and seeking the reward that is ascribed for those various intentions. And know that drawing nearer to Him can only be done through the obligatory and supererogatory devotions, which is your faraid and your sunnah. And sunnah, yeah, doesn't just refer to salah, right? That He has indicated through the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So when we refer to sunnah, we refer to the various practices that He conducted throughout His life. And when we mention that addiction is a spiritual disease, and that through addiction we become disconnected from Allah, one of the things that we seek to do is obviously to draw closer to Allah through our recovery, right? And here Imam al-Haddad, obviously the book isn't written relative to recovery, but the lesson sticks, or the lesson holds nonetheless. If you think about, really, he's giving a formula for life, and this is what essentially what recovery comes down to, is being able to deal with life on life's terms, right? Life as and when it happens, not by our schedule or our wants or our whims or our will, right? And so Imam al-Haddad is telling us that, look, don't speak, don't act, don't do anything, take no action without being mindful of the intention, and without holding an intention that this act that I'm about to engage in is going to draw me closer to Allah, right? And that I'm going to earn reward from it. It's important again for us, because one of the ways in which they speak about addiction is that very often it involves what they call a distorted reward mechanism. And so we find that some addicts feel just down and depressed and think, oh God, like I really need a fix because life's just terrible and so I deserve this. And they'll arrive at the same conclusion that I deserve this even when celebrating. They'll be like, oh my God, I just did this thing, I got a promotion, or it's my birthday, or it's whatever, and so I deserve to enjoy myself a little bit. Right? In addiction, all roads lead to an act out. That's just the way it is. Right? And Imam al-Haddad is telling us here that consider all your thoughts, all your actions, all your words. Is it drawing you closer to Allah? Right? And again, this is a lesson for life, and you'll see this in the actions of the pious, and this is why we're encouraged to spend time around the pious and just to observe them. Right? They say about Tarim, for instance, that the city of Tarim is the sheikh or the streets of Tarim rather. The streets of the Tarim are the sheikh to the one who has no sheikh. And why is that? Simply because if you did nothing else in Tarim other than observe the character of its inhabitants, then you will learn so much. You don't need to be sitting in the school, you don't need to be anywhere other than just on the street and just observing the character of the people. A few examples spring to mind. For instance, there's very close to Dar Mustafa, there's a fruit seller. And whenever he weighs off the fruit, they still use like the scale system, right? Tarim, to a certain extent, is a little bit like, stepping back into time. So he still uses the scales with the weights and that kind of thing. And it doesn't matter if the scale evens out, you'll always find that he gives you something extra when you leave. Simply because, he wants to make absolutely sure that in no way is he at any point eating on someone else's haq. Right? Just incredible. There's an incident between a taxi driver and an old man. The old man stepping in front of the taxi, and here in Cape Town, Cape Town's renowned for taxi violence, and more often than not, you hear like very colorful language if the taxi drivers get upset, or if there's an incident on the road or anything like that. And so while this man steps in front of the taxi, he then steps back onto the pavement, and between himself and the taxi driver, they're apologizing to each other, and they're making dua for each other. And I'm like, there are cars behind us, like traffic is behind. No one's hooting, because they see something is unfolding and they allow it to unfold. And so there's just so much of good character that we get to observe through others, right? So it brings me back to my point, which was that through observing the acts of the pious, one of the things that you learn in fiqh, for instance, is that when we enter the toilet, we enter with the left foot, and when we leave with the right foot. And the idea is simply that generally, whenever we move from one place to the next, right? Like for instance, the toilet is with the left foot, but the masjid we enter with the right foot, right? The idea being that depending on where we're going, we would give preference to one of the feet, right? And so there's a consciousness of, is the place I'm stepping into a greater in importance or significance or purity than the place I'm coming from. So on some level, there's always this question, in the minds of the pious, where am I moving? And what is the state of the place I'm in, right? And you'll find that, and I noticed one of my teachers do this not long ago. He was busy doing something and walking at the same time, and he steps across the threshold of the dar, right, the school, and immediately he stops, and I'm walking with him, and I'm like, what's happening? And then he steps back, and then he walks through. And what had happened is, the way he was walking, he had stepped with his left foot onto the threshold. And as busy as he was, this has been, ingrained in his character to be mindful of, how am I stepping into the dar? And so he steps back and enters it with the right foot. Right? So there's just this constant question in their minds about, even just where am I walking to? Right? And is this drawing me closer to Allah? So the question we get to ask ourselves is this action I'm about to engage in drawing me closer to Allah? And here, we find that it's, and this is how many have attained piety. In Tareem, of the advices that Habib Umar has given to women, he says that of the saints buried in the Zambal, majority of them are women. And how did they attain these states? Because if you think about, generally in an Islamic home, in Arab home, that it's the men that go out and they work and they study and that kind of thing, and the women are at home. But that's not the determining factor for how you attain piety. So, Habib gives the example that, don't think that because you're at home that you are cut off from good deeds. And so you hear stories of how when the women cook and they stir the pot, as they stir, they're reciting salawat, as they, chopping their vegetables, or as they're peeling their vegetables, or as they, every little thing that they're doing, they're engaged in an act of ibadah. And so by attaching the intention to the action, there's an expansion of that action, intrinsically, from just a habit or just a deed to an act of worship. And you find that, with this sort of mindset, that the women find more and more opportunity to engage in good. There's a book that Habib mentions, the name escapes my mind, but in the introduction of the book, the author, which is a woman, writes, and she puts in, actually it might be at the end of the book, but the point being that she writes in there that please forgive the legibility of this book, and if I've made any mistakes, because I wrote this book while breastfeeding. So while she was feeding a child, she was still writing a book. How many of us it's just unfathomable that we talk about multitasking, but authoring a work is like something else, subhanallah. And so again, relative to addiction, in the beginning, our actions can seem menial. It's like, oh God, I need to get up, I need to shower, I need to maybe go eat something, I need to maybe do some chores, or this, that, and the other, right? And so when our lives have to a certain extent fallen apart and we're trying to rebuild it, in the beginning the aren't grand gestures or great acts that we are engaged in. But even those things that we're engaged in, just the few that I've rattled off, can be a means for opening, and a means for attaining piety, and a means for attaining reward from Allah. So for instance, if you think about a shower, that we could make the intention that we are in fact taking a ghusl, right? And that we intend to maintain a state of purity throughout the day, for instance, right? One of my teachers was speaking about the act of taking a ghusl, and how it in fact invigorates and resets the mind, that there's a psychological cleansing that happens. And with some of my clients in coaching, they've discovered a similar thing, that in times when they are deeply stuck and are unable to think themselves out of a situation, they simply jump into a cold shower, and the shift that happens, not just on a physical level but a mental level, is just so profound. So anyway, we can make an intention for ghusl. When we're eating, we could just think of it that okay, well, I need to eat because I'm human and I need to eat. Or we could eat with the intention of um, gaining energy and sustenance so that we can perform acts of ibadah, right? So the eating itself becomes an act of ibadah, right? And as we go through this chapter, we'll find how Imam al-Haddad teaches us to integrate these intentions with our actions. And again, I'm mentioning this because while by societal standards, the life of a recovering addict doesn't really look glamorous. If anything, more often than not, it looks like they're wasting their lives away, because, well, they're perhaps unemployed, or they don't yet have things together, or they're not able to function on a level where they are able to take care of themselves. So most just see them as a burden, whereas spiritually, this can be a time of great growth and benefit. So Imam al-Haddad goes on to say, a sincere intention may change a merely licit action into a devotional action, for means are judged according to the ends. For example, one may eat to get the strength to perform devotional actions, or sleep with one's wife to obtain a son who would worship Allah, right? And even if you say, no, but I have no intention to have more children, or to have any children to worship Allah, then you could still sleep with your wife with a noble intention, with the intention that it relieves your nafs and doesn't cause you to stray into seeking out illicit affairs or illegitimate affairs or extramarital affairs. And here, this is like a really interesting point, because in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ of actions being judged by the intentions, he also mentions that the reward that we experience is aligned to the intention that we have. And to this end, it's a really something that we often overlook, is relations with our spouses. What is the intention behind it? Because, and one of my teachers mentioned this, he says that so many of us who have engaged in pornography say to ourselves that, you know what, I'm going to leave it when I get married, because right now I'm doing it because I have no other release, and so I'm going to do it when I'm going to leave it off when I get married. The reality being that we don't necessarily leave it off when we get married, right? And some might say, no, well, but when I'm married, then I'm just going to focus my love and attention on my spouse, and that's the person I choose, and so I'm going to be faithful. But the moment he gets married, he thinks about, maybe I should take a second wife. And the guy who's taking a second wife thinks about, perhaps I should take a third. And the guy who thinks about the third, has taken the third, thinks about the fourth, right? And so the nature of man really isn't simply that when we engage in an act to satiate our need, that it in fact satiates it in its entirety. We have to a certain extent, or to as much of an extent as possible, attach noble intentions to it, so that when we do in fact engage in the relations with our spouse, that Allah doesn't just grant us the relief from the immediate need, but perhaps places that contentment and that tranquility in our heart with our spouses, so that we don't start to seek out others, right? And again, we ask Allah to grant us these benefits and these intentions as we go along and as we uncover them. It is a condition of the sincere intention that behavior does not belie it. For instance, a man who seeks knowledge, claiming that his intention is to practice and teach, will be proved insincere in his intention if, when the opportunity becomes available, that he doesn't in fact practice and teach what he has learnt, right? Or a man who pursues the world and claims that he's doing so only so that he may be independent of others and be able to give charity to the needy and help his relatives and that kind of thing, will be proved ineffectual in his intention if he should not do so when able. So here Imam al-Haddad is making a distinction, and it's so true of the journey of recovery, that we may start out with many intentions and many ideas about why we're following this particular path, only to discover that when push comes to shove, and when it's time to act on the commitments that we've made or the things that we've claimed, that more often than not we fall into a different pattern behavior. Right? Intentions don't affect sin, just as purification does not affect that which by its very nature is impure. So you can't attach a noble intention to a sin. Right? A man who goes along with another who is slandering a Muslim, then pretends that he only wanted to humor him, is himself a slanderer. So we have to take responsibility even just in the act of listening to another. Right? We have to be clear of what our intentions are, and really here's where scrupulousness comes in. Just this idea that even if I'm thinking, okay, I just want to humor this person, is humoring that person more important to you than drawing closer to Allah? Will humoring that person draw you closer to Allah? Right? The answer is no, because you're engaging in act of slander. Malicious intention attached to good deeds spoils it and renders it malicious. So intentions also have the ability to taint good deeds. Likewise, when one performs good deeds for the sake of wealth and prestige. So, for instance, giving charity, right? But giving it so that we're seen doing it. So often you see when people donate to big organizations, they stand there with this comically huge check, with exactly how much money has been given over, right? Or now it's all the rage on social media that when we give charity, that we're taking photos of it or recording a video of it, and so many YouTubers and things are. This is how they garner views and fame. Is by showing, oh, I did this for this person, I did that for that, I gave this homeless guy a haircut, or I gave this one a sandwich, or gave him a hotel room, or gave him $100 or whatever. And the idea here, there is a distinction to be made. The act of recording it in and of itself isn't necessarily bad. It's the intention. So you have to consider: am I doing this for the sake of fame, or am I doing it to perhaps motivate and encourage others to do the same? So, for instance, they find that and there's examples amongst the Sahabi even, that they spoke of their good intentions because it aroused a desire in others to also do good intentions, and they would compete with each other in good intentions and in good actions. Right. Right. Know that many intentions can be attached to a single act, and each of them will attract its full reward. This is important, because as addicts we're seeking reward, and the caveat or the determining factor here in attaining, actually receiving the reward, is dependent on how many intentions we've attached to the act. An example of this is in acts of worship, when someone reads the Quran intending to commune with Allah, which he will in fact do, right? But also to extract from it different kinds of knowledge. And we've spoken about before how the Quran contains so many different types of knowledge. There are advices, there are wisdoms, there are scientific miracles, etc., etc. Right? So to extract knowledge to benefit those who listen, or even just happen to hear the Quran, and so then to even not just having others listening to it, but experiencing the healing benefits of the Quran through hearing the recitation, even if you are reciting to yourself. And so there are a great many intentions that we can attach to a single act, and thereby through Allah's promise derive a great many rewards. Right? So if you think about as an addict, you now have gotten up and you've eaten, and so now perhaps there are a couple of chores to do, right? And in early recovery, this is like one of the biggest struggles, is just learning to do the little things, learning to take care of ourselves. Simple things like making the bed, or sweeping the house, or washing the dishes, or whatever it is, right? And again, here we can attach intention, because the Prophet ﷺ used to do all of those things. He would, do the dishes, he'd sew his clothes, he'd all those kinds of things. And so you could have an intention that I'm in fact acting upon the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and with that I'd like to draw the barakah of Allah, and that Allah grant me openings, and that Allah ease my journey, and that with this I also intend to rewire my mind and retrain my brain and improve my thinking and my level of responsibility, and taking ownership of my life and its situation, and the circumstances I find myself in, the circumstances I create for myself, etc., etc. And we can go on like all day. There are any number of intentions we can attach to a simple thing like making the bed, right? You could even say that, you could even hold the intention that even if someone else was going to do it for you, that perhaps you are relieving them of a worldly need. And so we attach the intention that Allah relieves a worldly need from us, or even a need of ours in the year after, right? Again, ajib, just how many intentions that we can attach to simple actions. Right. No more. The word intention can have one of two meanings. The first is the aim by which made you decide, do or say something. Taken in this sense, intention is usually better than the act when the act is good, or worse when the act is evil. The Prophet ﷺ has said, the intention of a believer is better than his action. Notice how he specifically mentions the believer. Right? The second, and I'm mentioning that because, again, as Muslims, we have to appreciate and be proud of this fact that we are Muslims, and there are special rewards that we draw down through holding these intentions, and that Allah just has a special mercy that He bestows on believers. The second is your decision and determination to act. Taken in this sense, it's not better than the act, the intention that we're speaking of. A man, when he decides to do something, can only be in one of three situations. 1, he decides and then he acts. 2, he decides but fails to act while able to. The way to evaluate these two situations can be clearly found in that which Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh has transmitted again from the Prophet ﷺ, where he says that God has written good and evil deeds, then rendered them clear. Anyone who intends a good deed but does not perform it, Allah records it as one good deed. Whereas if he intends and performs it, Allah records it as 10 good deeds up to 700 times, if not more. If he intends an evil deed and doesn't do it, intends an evil deed but doesn't do it, Allah records one full good deed. And if he intends and then does it, Allah records only one evil deed. So here, why I'm mentioning this one is, as addicts, part of our behavior is a preoccupation with our addiction. And so you'll find that there are times when we thought about acting out, but we didn't. And in doing so, we in fact draw a reward for it, a spiritual reward. And this is something that we have to appreciate, that every moment that we've thought about it and gone, no, I'm not going to, that is a win. That is a win. It's easy to go, oh God, why am I still thinking about it? And when will it end? And oh, how am I going to stop? And all of those things. But appreciate that in that moment, the way Allah has structured, His system of rewards, is just that He is immensely beneficent in this. Like He is just, allowing us. It's like scoring points without even like reaching the goalpost. Right? All you're doing is, in a moment, you aren't engaging in or acting upon an evil thought or an evil intention. Right? The third situation that a man could find himself in is he determines upon something which he is for the time being unable to do and says, were I able to do such and such a thing, then I would have. Right? For that person, he receives the same reward as the one who acts, whether this be for or against him. So the evidence for this, and again from a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that people are of four kinds. A man to whom God has given knowledge and wealth, and who uses his knowledge to manage his wealth. Another who says, were God to give me just as he gave so and so, I would act like him. For those two people, their rewards are equal. So if you know of someone who is immensely wealthy and who manages his wealth well and who is generous in the path of Allah, right? And here, we don't even need to know the person personally. We just think about Sayyidina Abu Bakr, for instance, who gave all of his wealth in the path of Allah, right? And this is just, again, how we can, earn reward for, like, doing close to nothing. If we were to simply say that were Allah to have given us the reward that He gave, or the ni'mah in terms of wealth that He gave Abu Bakr, then we too would have given all of it in the path of Allah. Right? We could hold that intention and reward and receive a full reward, the same that Abu Bakr did. Then a man to whom so those are the first two. The second two, a man to whom God has given wealth but no knowledge, who mishandles his wealth through his ignorance. And someone says, were God to give me as He has given so and so, I would act like him. Their burden of sin are equal. And we see this all the time. A classic example is social media, for instance. There are just endless examples of people who've been blessed with wealth and who squander it. Whether it's wasting it through like wasting food, with like silly challenges, or purchasing clothes which are in excess, or spending it in a way that's not going to earn Allah's pleasure. Any of those things, if you think to yourself, like if I had that, I would buy myself that, or I would spend my money like that, or I'd want to go here, I'd want to do that, whatever, right? Not recognizing that that person is in fact incurring a sin, and that we too, by association, are doing that. And here, this is important because one of the things that we sometimes do as addicts is we fantasize about a life outside of recovery. And so we think to ourselves, if I just like wasn't an addict, it would be so much fun to go to a party, or to like do a line of cocaine, or to do whatever. Were I not Muslim, then I'd be chasing this woman and that woman. I'd be doing whatever. Were I like this, and I would do like that. And without even realizing it, we are earning the same, not the reward, but the same burden of sin as the person committing those sins, like actually living that life. And so we have to bear in mind that we need to, as part of our journey of recovery, and that's why I titled it, sober intentions. We need to be sober even in our intentions. That even in our thoughts, we need to think sober thoughts. We need to not just think, okay, I can't act out, and so I'm not going to. We need to, banish from our minds even the thought of acting out, even the thought of falling into sin again. If it's a sin that we keep repeating, whatever it is, we need to just, as best as possible remove it from our minds. And the way to do this is simply by drawing our attention to something else. So for instance, if I were to tell you, don't think of a zebra, all you're going to think about is a zebra. The more I say the word zebra, even if I'm saying don't think about it, I keep using the word zebra, you keep seeing stripes. But if I say to you, look, don't think about the zebra, what you want to be thinking about is an apple, a delicious, juicy red apple. You know, the Prophet ﷺ loved red apples, and I know a place where you can get red apples, and it's like a really crispy and it's sweet, and just realize we're fasting, and so I don't want to go on about the red apples. But the more I use the word apples, the more you're going to think about apples, right? And this is the way the mind works. The mind, really goes wherever we direct it or instruct it to go. So the idea is simply that as part of our recovery, we develop deliberately things to direct our attention towards. And so this is why it's so important for us to start getting in touch with a sense of purpose, and even if it's just to be of service to others. If you're thinking about acting out, then think about instead, we are going to go hand out food later, or we are going to I need to reach out to a fellow, just see how they're doing, or I'm going to go work on my business, or I'm going to go think about how to surprise my wife, or how to spoil my kids, or how to anything, literally anything other than acting out. And so, here again, the way out, there are an infinite number of things that we could think about. It far outweighs the obsession, in terms of when we're obsessed, we're really just thinking about one thing. Here's like a million different things we could think about. But we need to notice that our mind keeps going to the one thing. So deliberately, we have to turn our attention to something else. Right? And so we ask that that Allah grant us an understanding of the lessons that Imam Haddad has imparted to us, that he grant us the ability to not just discover sober action or sober intentions, but to also act on all the intentions that we have, and that Allah grant us the clarity of mind and the presence of mind to constantly be mindful of how many intentions we can attach to simple things. And again, here this takes practice. It takes rehearsal. It takes repetition. So if you are in the early stages of trying out something new, for instance, let's say just listening to this class, right? Then think about, okay, cool, I'm listening to the class with the intention of learning. I'm perhaps also listening with the intention of teaching. I'm also listening with the intention of sharing. We're discussing Allah in here, so I'm listening. When I listen, I intend to draw closer to Allah. When I listen and share, I intend to call others to Allah. I'm hearing about Sunnah, so I'm intending to learn about the beloved Prophet ﷺ. I've heard about the Sunnah, so I intend to act upon it. And so again, when we identify these things, it's useful to write them down so that we can go back to it. We can remember. Because the thought might occur to you today, oh, you know what, this could be a form of da'wah. Tomorrow you listen to the class and you don't think about, I need to share it because it's a form of da'wah. Right? And so we ask that Allah grant us openings, that He grants us consciousness and awareness of our intentions, and of how much we can attain through these simple acts, that He grants us the opening to act on it and to receive full reward, and be mindful that the rewards that we're receiving, the ni'mah, are in fact because of our intentions, and so that we really practice on this. With that, أبدي وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.